Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American evangelical church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Remember, if you're listening to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast platforms, let us invite you to join the live interactive recording most Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on the Evangelicalish YouTube channel. Now to this episode of Evangelical-ish. Oh, wait, I don't hear you.
Hello, everybody. I know. It always helps if you unmute the mic.
April has this fancy new mic. If you're listening, you can't hear it, but on YouTube or Facebook, you can see it, and it's fancy.
Well,
but you haven't quite figured out the mute button yet, huh?
No, it's like this fancy little no touch, and I accidentally mute myself sometimes. I'm still getting used to it. Anyway, welcome to Evangelicalish, everybody. I'm April.
I'm Paul.
And we have a really awesome show for you. Yes, the intro still says Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, and today is a Tuesday, is when we are recording this, so we are aware of that.
Some are not happy about the live stream being moved, but others have said, "Hey, now I get to do it." So we're sorry and we're grateful and thank you. And
I feel like we've opened up a little more to like our audience in Europe or Australia, because a lot of times 9 p.m. Eastern is a terrible time for them, but random afternoons or mornings seem to work well. So so welcome to Evangelicalish. If you're not following us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and TikTok, we're on TikTok too. Follow us to find out when the mystery live will be from week to week until we fix our intro. So,
which we will one day.
Yes, we will. It's going to happen.
Well, we have an awesome. Are we ready to go to the guest?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I am ready. It's Tara Jean Stevens. She's the host and creator of Heaven Bent, a chart-topping podcast that spotlights Pentecostal and Charismatic movements. Tara Jean has also been a fan favorite on Vancouver radio and TV. That's Vancouver in British Columbia, not in Washington State. And she's been doing that for nearly 25 years. And today you can hear her smooth jazz morning show weekdays on Wave 98.3, Vancouver's coolest vibe. And you will recognize her jazz radio voice. Tara Jean, or TJ, as you asked us to call you, welcome to Evangelicalish.
Well, thank you very much. This is my smooth jazz voice. I just got off the air from my morning show, so I need to shake that off.
That is a perfect smooth jazz voice. I feel like I could just relax and go into a little peaceful state of rest.
Well, when I started in radio a really long time ago, when I was like 19 or 20, my voice was much higher, and I considered myself more of like a giggle girl. At the time, there weren't a lot of women that were hosting shows, especially on their own. So I think over the years, as I matured, my voice got deeper, and now I've got my own show, and I guess I got two shows. I've got my radio show and my podcast.
Yeah. I'm just concerned though that voice could be a stumbling block to your brothers in the
Oh gosh.
Well, that's okay with me. I was raised that my knees could also do that as well.
Yeah, or shoulders.
Oh yeah, shoulders.
Yeah, or if a bra strap sneaks out and says hello.
Well, Heaven Bent is a favorite podcast in our household. We can so relate with the story. So let me share, for those who may not have heard your podcast thus far, a little bit of what you do.
It shifted for me, and life as I had known it up until that point drastically changed one night when Mike was driving me home. I don't recall from what.
By the way, that's Mike Bickle of IHOPKC.
He pulled over onto an undeveloped lot near my house, and he said that he wanted to talk to me about something. He said he had a question to ask me, and this was his question. He asked if I felt for him as more than a friend. Now, this was just after I had begun my freshman year of high school. And his question was a jolt to me because I thought that I was in trouble. I thought that I was somehow too obvious in my crushing, my teen crush, and I was going to get rebuked. But I didn't want to lie because I thought I would be in more trouble. So I barely nodded my head, yes, that I did. And I braced for impact. He was quiet though, and he didn't begin a rebuke or a lecture of any kind. He said then that he had another question. And this was the question: did I think that he felt the same way for me? And I was not prepared for that question.
So that's Mike Bickle, the senior leader of IHOP Kansas City.
Former
And
senior leader of IHOP
yes,
Kansas City.
and TJ, you've been on top of this because you were actually doing a podcast before the scandals that have now broken out at that place broke out. So tell us about that process of finding out. You were just talking about prayer rooms and things, and then you find out there's a scandal brewing there.
So I'll take you back to the beginning of how I even came to do the season on IHOPKC at all. It was from when I launched season 1 on the Toronto Blessing, which was my experience in the Pentecostal and Charismatic Church. From, after releasing that, IHOP very quickly became the number 1 requested season. I didn't do it in season 2. I did Bethel in Reading. And then season 3, I went down to Nashville and, Pentecostal stuff down there. And the whole time it was just building the energy, the number of people who were reaching out, former IHOPers, please, we need to do this. We need to do this. So I finally went, okay, maybe I need to check in on these guys and see what's going on. And as I do with all of my seasons, I really start out hoping to be as balanced as possible. I'm really not trying to produce exposés that are scandalous and take churches down. It's just kind of what's happened. What's happened. So the IHOP season was very much about spiritual abuse and the mishandling of sexual misconduct claims, rape claims, sexual abuse claims from mostly young women. And so that season, that's what I focused on. There's, and there was this whole thing about Mike where people didn't want to say anything bad about him. They're like, yeah, all this stuff is happening, but Mike's a good guy. Mike's a great guy. It's just, the organization got messy. And then about this, I was releasing the season, going to release the season in the fall of 2023. And sometime in the spring, while I was still making it, I started to hear the first rumblings of something big that was coming. And it was some of my guests. TJ, I can't tell you yet, but something's happening. People are talking. There's an energy was taking place where a lot of different people started telling stories. And we now know that those stories were about alleged grooming and sexual abuse by Mike Bickle towards some of the younger women in his congregation, in his community, in his organization. I will say the craziest thing that was, it was the timing of it, really. So, sorry, I got someone texting me. It was the timing of it. So I started to release my episodes 1 week at a time in September. And then the week that I released my final episode, which is obviously the climactic, juiciest end or most dramatic sad end to my season, that week they publicly announced to everyone that Mike had been accused of these terrible things. And then I extended my season, and now I've released more bonus episodes than I have from the regular season.
Wow. And for those that maybe don't know, IHOP stands for International House of Prayer, right? Not pancakes.
Not pancakes, although they did have a lawsuit with IHOP back in the day. And IHOP came at them with a lawsuit and said, you can't do that. You can't use, that's us. You're going to make confusion. So formally, they always use or had used IHOPKC, But for the most part, everyone just calls it IHOP. If you know, you know.
So what goes through your mind as now you hear, oh, here's another church scandal, and this is in the, I guess, the lineage of your Christian heritage from the Vineyard, Bethel, New Apostolic Reformation movement. For those who don't know, IHOPKC was a very powerful Vineyard church in the old Vineyard movement, and they do 24-hour prayer room with like harp and bull worship music and all of these things. And so what goes through your mind as you start to hear this senior prophet may be a lech?
I wish that I had not been so kind and easy on him. That's what I thought. I regretted not. One of the things that Mike Bickle is most known for, and that IHOPKC is based on, and that is really being discussed right now, is his prophetic history. So Mike Bickle had a collection of prophetic moments and prophecies that were made by trusted prophets in their community, many of them in the Kansas City area. Things that he said it happened to him, including seeing angels. I mean, really physical, I listen to those things, and I'm not a believer anymore. I care about people in the church. That's why I'm doing what I do. I'm curious about the church. But I started to just, when I was making the season, I started to go, well, obviously that's a lie. Like, to me, obviously that's a lie. I know that he's making that stuff up, but I don't go on my podcast and go, Mike Bickle's lying to you guys. He's making up these things. Why are you so stupid? Or, you know what? That's not what I do in my pod. I give space for people to listen to each other and hear each other out, because it's not black and white, right? It's very complicated. And for each individual person, it's a different kind of journey. But now that everyone in this community, you know, in it and out of it, and everyone's sort of tuning into what's happening, is starting to unravel the lies that he told. I knew they were lies. Why didn't I put that in my pod? I don't know. I was being too nice to him. I don't know if I was worried about legal repercussions, or because I could have leaned into him. I had that stuff. I knew I had that stuff. So that's that. I'll say that's what I.
Is there any of that "don't touch the man of God" stuff running through your head in that?
No, it's not that. It was, I mean, everybody said he's just a good guy. He's just a good guy. The people that criticized him the most, it was really about the spiritual abuse, you know, and that kind of thing. But, you know, a few people just said to me, TJ, I think he's a little dumb. I just think he's dumb. I think he, you know, privately they were saying this to me. Don't put this in your pod. But, you know, he's just he's made some stuff up. He believes the things he's telling himself. And, you know, and enough people said that. And then it just turns out, like, allegedly, he was just fooling everyone.
Have you got an actual response from Mike Bickle in your journalism or anything?
Not specifically from him. However, on the weekend before I released my first episode, even though I had tried to contact everyone for a good year, I mean, finding different emails, taking one person's email and changing the name to see if I could get in touch with someone else. And I mean, I just got nothing. Nobody would write me back from anyone in IHOP. Like, it was zero. And they have and had for years a media ban. Don't talk to media. They've been burned by that in the past. So, you know, don't talk to me. And then the weekend before I released the first episode, I had Mike's email, and I just sent him an email from the heart and said, I've worked on this for a year. I've tried to be as fair and balanced as possible, but some of the people, all of the people on this pod, well, most of the people on the pod are bringing up some pretty hurtful things. And I'm giving you one last chance to be involved with this, even though I had given them dates in August that said, if you don't get back to me by this date, that's it, right? Because I had to finalize my episodes. But I was so desperate for balance, and it was not there. I knew that this season was not balanced, and it got even less balanced because one of the gentlemen who starts the very first episode was a pro IHOP voice, and he's only heard in season 1 because after he heard the rest of the season, he said, I don't want to be a part of this. This is a scandal. You're telling lies. This is not true. So I had to cut him out of the rest of the season. Just in order, I didn't have to. He had signed a contract, but I don't want anybody like not wanting to be a part of what I'm creating. I really don't want those kinds of vibes. So it was unfortunate that I had to write him out of the rest of the season. However, when I sent that email to Mike on the weekend before I released the first episode, the next morning I got an email from someone who had been one of Mike's personal assistants, sort of, and had worked on his staff. And he sent me an email and told me, Mike forwarded me your email. He thought maybe I could be the one to speak with you. I'm on Mike's staff. So I was like, wicked, let's go. I'm willing to change the whole season and get your voice in there. This is incredible. And then I did the interview with this guy, and it just didn't feel right. There was something, and I've become kind of friends with this guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but I've become very friendly with this guy. And I think I did him a huge favor by not including his interview, because he wasn't fully aware of what Mike was covering up at the time. He knew a little bit. And I'm glad that I went with my gut and didn't include him. But it was part of Mike saying, hey, go on this pod and say some nice things about me. Say I'm a godly man. Counteract all these things that everyone is saying. But I mean, within a month, everything had fallen apart. So, and has continued to fall apart.
How did it start? Was there one person that kind of publicly came forward, or
not even publicly? She came forward privately in the background. I think she had, if I remember correctly, had heard the Bill Cosby podcast about all the women who came forward to Bill Cosby. And she just thought to herself, could that be me? Do I have a story like that? Could I ever tell this story? And then it just became, I don't remember exactly, but she tells her husband, she tells her friend, they tell one of the former leaders. They're all shocked. They can't believe it. But what a lot of people have started to call the golden thread, attached a bunch of women who all came forward privately at the same time to different people. It's like a miracle, honestly. I mean, this is going back decades, and to have my podcast and these women all come forward sort of in a matter of the same year is, I don't even believe in it. I believe it's a miracle. It just seems like it. I don't know. I was like, if there was ever anything that was going to bring me back, it was the timing of this season. It was just crazy. But yeah, the golden thread that tied them all together was the story that in some capacity, in some form, Mike told each of these women, my wife, Diane, is going to die, and I'm going to marry you, and you're going to become the matriarch of this prayer movement. So he allegedly said this in some form to numerous different women. I'm not sure of the total tally yet, but in an interview about a month ago, one of the women who's sort of in the group of advocates, a former IHOP leader, she said that there was like close to 19 women who felt that they were victims or survivors of Mike Bickle.
And I think it's all horrifying, but for somebody like me who grew up in a prophetic atmosphere of a church, and April and I are both survivors of the Assemblies of God, and as an adult I was in the Vineyard Bethel movement, to know that these, and it's not just Mike Bickle, there were other of the Kansas City prophets who used prophecy to groom their victims.
Yeah. Men and women, young women and young men. Yeah.
I don't know if there's a question in that, but I'm just sitting with that idea of how much prophecy meant to me, and these people so abused it.
Yeah, they absolutely abused it. Sometimes, like, it's one of those things, like I said a moment ago, it's like, well, I'm watching these videos and know that it's not true, but I can also go back and remember what it felt like to believe. It's not hard for me. When I hear worship music, I'm taken back. I feel reverent. I feel moved. I want more of whatever that is. But now fast forward to whatever I'm in now, I can get that feeling from, as I've said in my pod, from going to a Coldplay concert, or, listening to a really beautiful song in the car with my daughter while she's singing and belting at the top of her voice. I get that feeling from other places. But yeah, the prophetic stuff sits really heavy with me because of how it impacted me. Like I shared in season 1, even the audio of it, where my mom, when I was a little tiny girl, went to a women's conference, and she had a woman prophet, prophesy over her about me, about her little daughter with brown hair. She said, "You have 2 daughters, but it's the one with brown hair, and that's me." And she told her that I would use my voice for God. And I still think about that. Like,
and you are.
I am. I don't even believe in God anymore in the same way, the context that we're talking about. But I feel like I am using my voice for that. And I'm so moved and confused by that. Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier, and I know this is in your podcast too, that Mike told several different women that his wife was going to die, and they would become his new wife. Is his wife still alive?
Yeah, his wife is still with him, still supports him, as do his sons. From all my contacts and what they've told me, they are supporting him. My impression is that, and you hear this on my next episode with Tammy Woods, who was his youngest alleged victim at the time of the abuse. She was 14 years old and his family's babysitter in 1983. And that's the person who you heard at the beginning of our time together telling her story in my next episode, which I'll be releasing in the next couple weeks. What was I saying? What was
his wife's still alive.
His wife's still alive. Yeah. So her name is Diane. Some people have described her to me as his first victim. So that she could have been, groomed and led to the same thing. But at some point you have to go, she's just in it with him. I mean,
are they still together?
They're still together. I mean, they're absolutely still together. So I don't know what's going on there. It's weird. Somebody told me once that knows her well said, doesn't matter how much stuff comes out, she'll always just support him. So I don't know. You would have thought that she'd be the first one to come out and rail, but she's not built like that. A lot of these women with respect are incredibly subservient to the men in their life. And we know the dynamic. We all know it. I even,
Harrison Butker voiced it well this week.
Sure. But I'm also not completely poo-pooing that dynamic. I know that in my marriage works best because I got a high profile job. I got a radio in town. I used to be on morning television. Like I'm the main breadwinner in my family, all that kind of thing. But I still know that my marriage works best when I show my husband that I need him to protect me, that I want him to wrap it, that I want all of that. So it's not role play. It keeps my marriage alive. So it might not be like that for everyone, but there's still parts of that conservative sort of Christian male female dynamic that still works for me. But yeah, Diane is a bit of a mystery.
And to me, that's the thing of, well, there's a little Melania Trump syndrome there, perhaps. I don't know, but
who knows what's going on with her? That's a whole other.
I just want to know how much she's been paid. That's all I want to know. But
yeah,
you talked about the worship music. For me, listening to like Bethel worship music or IHOP is still a little triggering, and I just can't do it because the Sean Foyts of the world and Benny Johnsons have blown that up for me. But I do need to caveat that I actually know personally a Kansas City prophet. And
which one? You can't say?
I'm not. We can talk later. I'm not ready to say it out loud.
Blink twice.
Let's just say I hear more is coming with some of the other prophets, and Misty Edwards, who was one of my favorite worship leaders, has come out as having an affair. And there's is she a victim, or did she make choices, and was she groomed? It just seems like this isn't one-off stuff anymore. This is it baked into the system of evangelicalism, of Christianity as a whole? How do you see it from your coverage and perspective?
Here's what I know is that ever since the stuff about Mike has come out, that I have heard, I've lost track of how many abusers in various churches connected to IHOP, connected to my church environment here in British Columbia, but they're all connected. I mean, these people all know each other. They come, people from Kansas City were in Kelowna just a few weeks ago. Like, I mean, it's all, Kelowna's a town a couple hours away from me. So it was shocking at first how many women came forward. Hey, I'm just like that. There's a group of us women who we've all been abused by this one man. Or I would hear from 3 or 4 different women completely separate about one person. And then I'd go, you girls need to get together. And now they have a little group and they're forming, I'm just one woman. I do everything by myself. So I can't handle all of them, but I have folders in my Google Drive with the names of these men. And I've lost count of how many I haven't even added to that. I got too overwhelming. It was too much. Can I say that right now? I've even heard about some really atrocious grooming and sexual abuse in my own childhood church. And that rocked me for days. Because that person that came to me that, she heard my pod and she thought, I need to tell TJ that happened in her church too. And it has made me think that, it has firmed up my belief that I always knew that like believers were vulnerable. And that's part of why I continued with Heaven Bent. It's not to take down church. It's not to make people not believe in God anymore. That is not what I'm talking. It's about, can you be safe? And can you go in and worship and be in this community and be safe? Are your children safe? What are the things that you're teaching them? The stuff that I was harmed by, which was just, for me, it was a spirit of fear thing, because I was told in youth group about the witching hour, and that at 2:00 every night, there are demons and devils at my windows, like physical presence trying to get in. And I mean, for years, I was terrified. Even after I didn't believe, I was terrified. And honestly, where I got rid of that spirit of fear was my husband. He was an atheist. He did not believe in any of that. He was a big, strong guy. And the combination of having, I'm not an atheist, but having him be so far on the other side helped balance me out from that extreme place that I had been in.
Yeah. I think too, there's a combination between that verse that is, I think, especially used in prophetic charismatic circles, that do not touch God's anointed. And so
that comes up a lot.
Right. And so you're constantly, even if something isn't settling right with you, you're trained, especially if you grow up in it from an early age, to, even if you have doubts, you just keep it to yourself, because you don't want to hurt someone's witness. You don't want to hurt the faith. Especially in more complementarian environments, which I think a lot of charismatics are generally a little more egalitarian, like they're a little more pro women, but even still, there's still this underlying of like, men are really who God has called, and women are the help and the support, equal but different. But that's just like a grooming. I remember I had a friend. She was like my best friend in college, and she got sucked into YWAM. It was like a YWAM that was in Reading. So they also did the Bethel. School of Supernatural Ministry. Yeah. And she came back
2 feet in it with that one.
Oh, I know. Double whammy. And so she went away for like a year, because I was in Texas. And when she came back, I mean, I was charismatic too, but I thought she would be the same, but she came back and was pretty much very culty. And she started going to this new church in the Dallas area that was very IHOP inspired, Bethel inspired. And it was super weird. And she started dating this dude, and like the whole ministry and this guy were telling her that it was God's will for her to be with him. And he was like probably 12, 13 years older. And like red flags were going off for me. And I remember telling her, I'm like, you can't just go by what they're saying. Like, you need to, that doesn't mean it's God's will just because all of these people are saying that. And she was like, she was hooked, you
That
know,
would be
and
hard
was
to count that down.
right. And like, I lost the friendship over it. And it's still like one of my biggest grievances and like in life, but it's just so sad how, you know, you're also like, it becomes culty because you're also trained. Anyone that would be a dissenter telling you, you know, to go against this ministry, these men of God, like that's probably Satan sending them, and you need to distance yourself. So now, not only are you being manipulated by these leaders, but you've now isolated yourself and you have no other outside thought or opinions coming in.
You know, you bring up the word cult or culty, right? And it's such a triggering word. And I have to be very careful with the language that I use in my pod. Every season, I've had to be careful with that word. I mean, even in season 2, my whole guiding question for that season with Bethel in Reading was like, is this a cult? And I could only get to the point where I could say, well, it's cultish. It's cultish. That's what I felt fair saying, because if you call something a cult, you can face legal repercussions because they would have to then prove that they weren't a cult. But you know, whatever. I don't know how easy that would go. But
well, we're evangelical-ish, so it's
you know.
Yes.
But the thing about cult is like, well, if you call, let's say, Bethel or IHOP a cult, then is the whole charismatic church a cult? Is evangelicalism a cult? Is Christianity a cult? Is it just, it's a very slippery slope. And I think that is very similar. It's hard to do that. You don't want to, like, I don't even want to do that. I don't want to tackle, is Christianity a cult? That's like, my brain would explode. But that's the kind of thing that comes up when you start to call these respected, gigantic Christian organizations culty. But honestly, I mean, if we can just focus in on Mike Bickle, if you take away that he was respected and that it's Christian and that we're supposed to just respect that, we're kind of, you know, taught to just respect that. Even if you're not a Christian, you're still supposed to respect Christians in North America, especially, you know, that's just the way it is. And, you know, if you think about Mike Bickle and take away all of that, he literally is like a cult leader, talking about God speaking to him, that he is a chosen one, that all of these, you know, prophetic things happened to him that came true. You can pick those things apart so quickly. And that's like, it ties back to what I said at the beginning. I researched all those and went back and saw, oh, you said it was raining on that day. The forecast says on that day there was no rain, or like whatever, like just silly stuff like that. And I just wish now I could go back and be way more specific with that stuff. Instead, I just have these moments until I got to the bonus episodes where I'm like, well, yeah, he kind of like held a girl by the throat up to the wall, but he's a nice guy. Like, what the fuck? What the heck?
And people are going to go to hell if we take him down, you know, all of those things.
Yeah,
but
the prayer movement will fall apart. Yeah.
Part of the interesting bit of the story is your heritage, and I want to hear about that. But April, I thought I might take a moment to tell everybody we've got a really cool June coming up. We're taking a break next week, and then June is amazing because we have, well, it's amazing today because we have Tara Jean, but Sarah McCammon is coming on June 5th, or the week of June 5th. She has the new book, The Ex-Evangelicals, out. And then Dan McClellan, the week after that, who we love, who is a TikTok Bible scholar that has a huge following. And then Candy Carpenter, who I'm a big fan of online. If you haven't heard of her, she does all this cool music about how she's going to hell, and her mom told her she loves God more than her. So anyway, I just wanted to give some promotion to our shows coming up in June, which is awesome.
That sounds great, guys.
So much fun. So TJ, tell us, when your first season was about the Vineyard movement, focused on Toronto, the movement, and that is a very special movement in my heart, and it was part of your heritage as well. So talk about that and how it led to you doing the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised in the Pentecostal up here in Canada, but it's very much vineyard infused. So I went to a tiny little Pentecostal church up in Prince Rupert, which is up the British Columbia coast at the bottom of the Alaskan Panhandle. So really quite remote. But in the 90s, the Toronto Blessing Revival spread to our church after some adults from our church went to Toronto because they had heard about what was happening at the Toronto Airport Vineyard Church, or whatever it was called at the time. And when they came back with these wild stories of gold dust falling from the sky on their hands. And when I heard that, I mean, these were my friends' parents standing in front of us. So of course what they're saying is I believed, I 100% believed that gold dust fell on their hands, that they might have it, they were like, it's in my pocket, look at the shine, or then the real pivotal moment for me that is really the root of why I started Heaven Bent was that Sunday morning after they came back, my friend's mom stood at the front of the church and said that God had given her a gold molar. And we all got in a lineup and she opened her mouth and we all came in and looked at her gold molar. And years later, I'd stopped going to church. I was in my 20s. I had had some heathen years. I mean, guilt, like all of it. And I finally was like, okay, I've moved on now. I don't believe in this anymore. I'd gone to college.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt 1 second just to say gold teeth appearing was a big hallmark of the movement. People regularly were getting gold teeth.
It was a big part of the Toronto Blessing for sure. It's happened in other movements as well, but definitely there. And, so after I got rid of like my belief structure really, and I was rebuilding it. I got rid of down to the bones. There was just still that one memory of the gold tooth. And I said to myself, if that's real, then the rest of it is real and I'm going to go to hell. So I had to investigate it, look into it to settle my own self. And at the time when I made season 1, I was open to finding miracles, supernatural activity, and that's not black and white either, and I hope if you listen to Heaven Bent, you kind of get that as I go along. But it was really that story that launched me into the season. And when I started making Heaven Bent, I had no idea about the word deconstruction. I didn't know that other people were going through what I was going through, questioning the things that I was taught, questioning the supernatural stuff. I didn't know. I mean, of course I knew other people were probably going through it, but we've built community over the years. You guys would know this. And we are a community of believers, on fire Christians, atheists, agnostics. I mean, I believe that there's something in the world. I'm not willing to give it a name or symbols or anything. I just know there's something in this world that is beyond what we know, and that makes me feel really good because it's like 5 years later and I'm still going, like I'm not stopping. So
was that gold tooth fake? Did you find out if the gold tooth was real or fake?
You can listen to season 1. I never answer that question. And again,
I listened to it and I can't remember.
It's not black and white. That's what it is. And I think I bring that home in the final episode of season 1, which is one of my favorite episodes that I've ever made.
You also, I saw that you had a couple episodes on the woman from James River with the toes.
The toes.
Yes.
That's been a whole journey too.
Show me the toes.
So backstory here, if you're not familiar, James River Church is a massive mega church not too far from IHOP in Kansas City. So it's not in Kansas City, but it's not too far away. And
it's the Assemblies of God Mecca in Springfield, Missouri.
Springfield. Yes.
It is an entertainment mega church. I mean, they have conferences with.
They had the sword swallower,
swallower on the
pole climbing sword swallower.
Just with like fireworks. I mean, they are a mega church. And was it last spring now? Yeah, last spring, Bill Johnson from Reading was at James River Church for a week of power, I think is what they called it. And during that week, and it was highly publicized and went viral, they all claimed that a miracle had happened, that a woman's amputated toes started regrowing during the service. And when I heard this, I thought, number one, that is the most provable miracle I've ever heard. Did her toes regrow or didn't they? And so I thought, I'm going to do this. There was one guy that started a website. You should check it out. It's called showmethetoes.com. He's also on social media. He's on Facebook and Instagram. And he's a little cheekier than I am. Like he rails on stuff more, where I try to be a little bit more sensitive to try to create a space that everyone can absorb the information. He leans on them hard. But I thought that when I did this bonus episode, or this special, episode, that it was only going to be my interview with this guy who was challenging the miracle. And then I thought, well, I'm going to at least need to reach out to this woman and ask her to come on the show or make comment. And to my shock, she agreed to come on Heaven Bent. So that 2-part episode is now the guy who thinks it's all a lie, and this woman who really truly does believe that her toes are regrowing. I've never found personally any proof of that. She's even showed me before and after molds of her toes, but she'll show it to you and say, see my miracle? But I don't see it. I don't see it. But she's my friend now. We're friends on Facebook. We chat. She knows that I don't really like her. But we've created something between us, that's like a respect between us, where I have leaned in is Bill Johnson and the pastor at James River Church should be held accountable for making claims and never going back and saying, hey, we got one wrong. They just leaned in on it and said, oh, actually, she's a traumatized woman and we can't talk about that miracle anymore. She's private. No, she's not. She's on my podcast talking about her miracle,
Yeah, I just heard him say that like in the last week, like, we will not produce this woman because of, but you're saying, yes. And he blamed the media, of course, the local newspaper, which they always do. And but you're saying, so she does not have like 3 whole toes where she used to not have toes.
It looks the same as it did before to me. I don't know what to say. Like I would have loved to be like, whoa, there is what happened there? That is a little something, And I, when she sent me she always promised me that when she got her, because she she's missing some toes like that. There's these little nubbies, and the backstory of how she it's toes is extremely traumatic, which you can hear in the episode. I won't get into it now, but it's also part of the reason why they are protecting her is real. She's had a really traumatizing life that will drop your jaw. But I just didn't see it. She showed me the molds, and I didn't even post them because I didn't want to go, she's crazy. Look at these before and afters. Like, there's nothing going on there. I sat on those photos and waited for Show Me the Toes to publish them, which he eventually did. And I'm like, I'll leave that to you. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's part of the, like, it's like tragic in a sense, because people do see what they want to see at a very basic level. And when she
knows her body.
Right. And when you really want to believe something, you can find ways to believe it and genuinely look at something that in your head this is proof that this happened. But to someone else who's maybe not as close to it, they can look at it and be like, that's not what you think it is.
I think, why is it too much to ask that if you call something a miracle, it should be evident to anyone who sees it? Why would God be vague and like, like, I just don't, like, what's the point of that? Yeah. I have, Bethel Church from season 2, they said we have hundreds of documented miracles. I didn't find one, not one. And I'm still open to it. Come to me. And over the years, I do regularly have people drop into my DMs and I read everything and I respond to everyone unless I, for some reason, missed it and something happened. But I generally respond to everybody. And I always know how it'll start. I know you don't believe, but here's my story that's going to change your mind. And then it'll be this big, long, or they'll record me, whatever, and I'll read it. And it's not a miracle. They just believe it's a miracle. But I've never been able to come across a single thing that would make everyone, because if that was true, we would all believe in miracles.
Yeah. And I think there is something about the brain, like people will come in on crutches and throw away the crutches, and then a week later they're back at the doctor with pain because the brain helped them in that moment to not feel pain anymore.
And I will say, like, I believe that healing happens in these services. I believe that healing happened in the Toronto Blessing, and it happens at Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry, and has happened in the 24/7 prayer room in IHOP. But I don't think the healing is the regrowth of toes, which has never scientifically happened anywhere on the planet in medical history. I don't believe that people's legs are regrowing longer, which is one that comes up all the time and is just easy to sort of misunderstand how the body works.
Yeah.
But I do believe that psychological, mental, emotional healing happens. I believe marriages are saved. I believe alcoholism can be, defeated. I believe in all of that. And it's unfortunate that in the charismatic church, more so, and especially, it goes into this different world and there's almost zero accountability for the things that they're claiming.
And in this day of everybody having a camera on their phone, these creative miracles, like we were told one that a young woman had her arm regrown. She had lost a limb and it regrew in front of this group of people. And not only did it regrow, but she had her nails painted on one hand. And when the other hand grew back, the nails were painted the same color. But my question was always, why does someone not have video of this? Because if that started happening, I know I would get my freaking phone out and say, we are going to show the world how great God is. Look at this.
It would be on the news.
Yes.
It would be on the news. We'd all be dropping to our knees. Yeah. I mean, there's a, Bethel Church, when I was doing season 2, one of the big things was their glory cloud story. And for anyone who's not familiar, this is this story that one time at Bethel, that the entire, like in this closed room, that the entire room just started like fluttering down gold sparkly flakes all over them. And I mean, there is video of that. There is video of that. Yeah. People are screaming, it's falling down all over them. But that doesn't mean that was a miracle. Somebody took the little, I interview him in that season. I think in that season, it might've been a bonus episode. Somebody took that stuff and put it under a microscope, and it was like dollar store stuff that had been made at a factory. I mean, it was most likely that somebody put that in the vent, and I'm not saying Bill Johnson put it in the vent. Could have been a janitor that just wanted to have some fun and have the spirit. Like, I don't know. All I know is that is not proof of a miracle.
Or maybe God shops at the dollar store.
Okay. Maybe I need to stay more open-minded. Hey, you checked me. You checked me there.
I'm curious. Have you heard of or had anyone send you any messages about, she's a self-proclaimed apostle, Catherine Crick?
No, I don't know her.
Oh my gosh. I don't really know her very well. She shows up in a lot of viral TikTok, Instagram.
Is she really?
She's younger.
She's younger. She's very confident, and she's on the street a lot.
Yes, and she does a lot of casting out of demons, and will claim that demons are manifesting. And she anyway, I've seen
I have, because she comes up in our algorithm, right? Online. Yep. She'll come up a lot. I eventually blocked her because I found her really cringy.
Yeah, she's one of those. I've seen a lot of, I don't follow her, but she just pops up. Or I see a lot of people that believe in what she's doing share her videos and whatnot.
She's a bit like Catherine Coleman. Like she's got that vibe to her, right? Like just the confidence and the getting out there. If we're talking about the same person, which I think
I'm pretty sure that we are. I know there was one video of it was like a kid who was being filmed who was just having a complete meltdown. It looked like a panic attack, honestly. But they were all saying it was manifesting of demons.
Yeah.
And that stuff just like, just hurts my heart as someone who like used to believe it and believed that I believed that I thought I had witnessed, someone being, having had the demons cast out of them. And now looking back, I'm like, was
That kid
that
was
what that
being
was?
traumatized. That kid is being spiritually abused and traumatized psychologically. You walk away from, imagine, right? I mean, when I was younger, I went to a youth convention. I was like, I don't know, 14 or something like that. Came down from Prince Rupert up north, and we would gather with like thousands of Christian teenagers in one of the interior towns in like a big hockey rink. And it was exactly as anyone from this, we know what these are. It's just music and singing and preaching. And then everyone's the altar call, and you go down to the front, and it's 2 hours of just prayer and hands on and all that stuff, where I do believe that healing could happen, right? Maybe somebody had been abused, or, you can find healing in that and comfort from the people around you. And I believe in healing hands when someone touches you. It's why we touch ourselves when we're hurt, or when our kids are hurt, we put our hands on their boo-boos, And this one particular service, I'm very dramatic. I'm an actress. I'm a performer. I can be a drama queen when it comes down to it. And I was down at the altar, and I had my hands up, and I was just weeping, crying. I was shaking. I was just like, I had never been that, just giving her. And a man came up to me and a couple other people from his church, and they started trying to cast a demon out of me. And I remember thinking, I'm just crying because I think God's telling me to break up with my boyfriend. Like that was what was going on. It was very innocent. And they came up, and I mean, that really it traumatized me for a long time, because I thought, oh, did I have a demon in me? Was I being deceived that I was crying about my boyfriend? Did God really tell me I should break up with my boyfriend? And I now don't believe God was telling me to break up with my boyfriend. I believe that I shouldn't be in that relationship. And it was, personally, I think it was just my gut telling me that. But I do remember my pastor from my church, and I'll always feel protected and respected by him, because he came up and told them to stop. He came up and stopped them. And even though it still sat with anyone who's had anyone try to cast a demon out of them, you're going to be impacted by that in some way. But that is one of the things I remember, is him coming up and just saying, hey, give her some space, back away. Because he knows me. He knew I could be dramatic like that. I was in his youth group.
And I've had my own diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, and I am learning about parts therapy in all of us.
Wow.
Those demons that we cast out, I believe, are protective parts inside of people. It's very, very cruel. But one of the things you said that's very interesting, like this idea that it was prophesied you would use your voice for God. And I'm really intrigued by that. And it almost sounds like in some way you're like, oh yeah, that still inspires me. And there's a part of me that still says, I've seen things that I can't explain. We had a guy come to our church, and I went to dinner with him, and like he took the hand of our waitress and says, the last 4 digits of your social security number tells her your birth date is, and she just starts, there's no way he could have looked. He didn't know where we were eating dinner. He couldn't have looked her up on the internet. And he knew things about her. I've seen these things. And so do you still feel like you said, I'm with you. There's something bigger out there, and it may just be our energy connecting to each other or something, but I'm not willing to just give that away because Mike Bickle is a terrible human being. I still want to pursue that spirituality.
I do believe there are things that I don't have the language to explain. I don't believe that it's necessary, that it's supernatural or related to religion or spirituality, though, because I've never seen proof of that. I think it's maybe something science-y that we don't understand yet about the universe. That's what I think. I'm different than you in that I will never believe that the phone numbers and the numbers and the birth dates and the street names are anything more than either a fraud or maybe maybe it's like psychic ability. But I mean, I did quite a look into Sean Bowles. Do you guys know Sean Bowles?
I know Sean really well.
Yeah, so Sean Bowles, I twice have seen him, and he's very charismatic. Like I love being, I really enjoyed both times sitting in those sessions. But me and others have cross-checked every single one that he's done, and you can trace it back. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, you could go back a few years on someone's Facebook and you'd find the post. Oh, there's their street. There's the tree outside that he mentioned. You know, she's got her house right there. And it's tough because, you know, when I found one of when he came to Vancouver and I was making that season, and I went and I recorded, and you know, there was like 4 or 5 prophetic moments where he said, you know, somebody blank here, and that person would stand up, and you'd think it was so crazy. I took the notes, I went back, and other than one of them, which I think I'm just going to count it off, but every single one of them, I found the stuff online. But then I contacted the church and the organizers and said, you know, here I was there. I'm just trying to get some accountability. And they swore up and down, he does not have access to the people who are coming. They do not know he's coming. But the people who he was, and it's not 100%. I'm just saying what I looked at, you know, the people that I looked at that he had that going on with, they were all very vocal online that they were coming to that show.
And they registered for the event. Yeah.
They registered for the event. They, you know, that to me is just, I would love, because Sean Bowles is so charming and seems like a really nice guy. Like, it's really hard to imagine the level of fraud that he would be committing. It's just hard to believe, right? It's hard to believe, even though I've heard about Mike Bickle and you hear about this other stuff, right? I still have trouble believing that, because I believe the best in most people. And I think that's why I didn't go deep onto Mike Bickle. So I just believe the best in most people, you know? But I would love it if somebody like Sean Bowles would invite somebody like me to just witness his work for a bit. Show me before a show that you just sit there and pray in a room. Show me that, you know, you really do need your phone because you have a bad memory, and it's not because of these crazy specific details that you've recorded from the internet. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to show me or someone else your work. You know what I mean? Here's how I get here.
Yeah.
But it's private, it's hidden. And I think that's probably for a reason.
I think it's also sad too that the people around the Mike Bickles of the world don't need that accountability. Like, they're not looking for the proof or the evidence. They just take it at its word. And you know, I think
a prophet or an apostle or
right.
You know,
oh, ye of little faith. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to be the doubting Thomas. That's, you know, that's like a derogatory term in these spaces.
Yeah.
Well, Tara Jean, tell people where they find you online and your podcast and whatever else you want people to know about.
Oh, do we have to stop chatting and yapping? So Heaven Bent is available on wherever you get your podcasts, number one. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you know, Apple Music, Amazon Music, places like that. And you can also check me out on all my social networks, whichever your favorite one is. Heaven Bent is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
Lovely.
And
Awesome.
and I give this podcast my highest recommendation.
Thank you, guys.
You've got to hear
you.
it. It's right there with anything Julie Roy's does or the Mars Hill podcast. I mean, it's a super well done, highly produced, highly researched. It's really, really good.
Thank you so much. And all those people you just mentioned, like a lot of those people are Christian journalists or from the church or whatever, but they're peers to me, and we're all in this together. You know, I think we all have a sort of lane that we're in. And if we just stick to it, then we're going to make things better.
Yeah. I do think you're saving souls in a different way than, you know, we may have once taught about it. Cause there's so much value too in trying to be more balanced and nuanced, and being very intentional about that, because you can reach the people that might be future victims.
Yeah.
And hopefully pull them out before they are.
I'll tell you one more. Can I tell you one more story before we
Yeah.
go?
Absolutely.
So I'll try to be a little vague with details, but I got a message from just somebody that reached out a couple days ago, and she was halfway through. She was an IHOPper, and she didn't want to listen to Heaven Bent because she figured it was just gonna, crap all over everything she believed or whatever. But then the stuff with Mike kept coming out. And so finally now in May, she was finally like, okay, I'm going to listen to this season. And she said that she got halfway through the season and had an epiphany of how IHOP leaders had lied to her during a crisis in her life. And the crisis was that she was in a terrible accident where her partner passed away, and that she leaned on these leaders and the church to comfort her through this time. And she said a regular message to her through these prayer sessions was that her faith had not been strong enough to save him. And that, I'm not going to take full credit for it, but something in my work in that season, something in the stories that her peers were telling her, people from IHOP, former IHOPers like her were sharing, something clicked in her, and she just felt like, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it seems to me like she got freedom in that. She was able to let go of that and piece back together her faith and what that really meant to her without all that baggage hanging on her. They have harmed people with this extreme stuff that they're doing. We just get it back to where church is about community and supporting each other and the power of prayer and healing hands. And I just believe it can be simple like that and still be a good thing and meaningful, even though I personally don't believe in the theology anymore. I think it's still meaningful in our society.
Yeah. Well, and a common goal that we don't want people to be harmed and manipulated and abused.
No.
And anybody that says your partner died because you didn't have enough faith, I just want to punch that person in the face.
Yeah. Exactly.
That is not, and in charismatic circles, that is not a rarity, because I was told similar things when my dad passed. So
it's very, very common.
Yeah.
If and any God that would say, I'm not going to heal your partner because you don't have enough faith, that's not a good God. That's not a good being. That's a terrible being. All right. Well, thank you for your work.
Thanks,
April,
guys.
Evangelic Cringe.
Yeah.
Time?
Sure. Let's do it. You want to stick around, TJ, and react to a cringy video?
So it's different today. I actually don't have a cringy video. This is a video that people are putting out in response to Harrison Butker's cringy speech. Dude, can I assume most, maybe our audience knows about Harrison Butker, the Kansas City Chiefs kicker who spoke at a commencement at a Catholic college and said, "Great job, ladies. You got your degree. Now go do what you really want to do, which is have babies, be a homemaker, and serve the dream of a man."
I think the biggest part of what he said that was so crazy to me was I can't remember his language, but like, you've been fooled. You've been duped.
He said, quote, "You've been told diabolical lies."
Thank you. That was it. Way worse than duped. Can you
diabolical lies that you could have a career.
Wow.
So I'm biomel. What did you guys? What was your response to Butker's speech?
Oh, just what male privilege at its peak. And honestly, if he had said that speech at like a Turning Point USA conference or some kind of conservative Christian event, I'd be like, I'd be like, whatever. That's, they say that stuff. But he said it at a graduation. Like women were there celebrating and like
their
at
diplomas.
Their diplomas and probably excited about whatever career future that diploma might bring. And to say that there was, just
two
the
things I took
misogyny.
from it. One was I just wondered really what the women there thought, because he was still in a room of, was it Catholics or
Catholic school? Yes.
Like, the other thing, I was wondering what they thought and how that impacted them. But then I also just looked at him and just thought, he's so confident in what he's saying. Like, he really does the earnestness in what he was saying. Like, I remember feeling that way about my faith when I was younger. Just, I'm so right. It's amazing to be right. Wow, all those people at the public, kids at the public school. Wow, I pity them. They don't know what I know. That's what I
And
saw
those
in him.
people that celebrate the deadly sin of Pride Month, and these things.
That's for next time, guys.
But I think he, in light of what we're talking about, the subject of like Mike Bickle, this message, and I had somebody very close to me last night on my social media said, "Amen, Harrison Butker. I've ordered his jersey." I think April, you said his jersey numbers are spiking, jersey sales. But the danger is, I think this ongoing message to Christian women that you are subservient to men and your highest calling is to serve men feeds this systemic problem we have of women and children being groomed by powerful Christian men.
Absolutely.
It's terrible. So for our Evangelic Cringe video, I have something different, and it's a speech that was made at a commencement in 2023 at Smith College, and it is I think it's a lawyer. She's talking about imposter syndrome and how imposter syndrome has been put upon women. And so this is not a cringy video. This is inspiring, and I think a good rebut to Harrison Butker. So here you go.
Go back to the 1890s, a few short decades after Smith was founded. Doctors had identified a never-before-seen medical malady, one that threatened to wreak havoc on the entire female population. That condition was called bicycle face. You see, the original bicycle had one gigantic wheel in the front and one tiny little wheel in the back. Imagine a hula hoop and a dinner plate. Not easy to ride. But then along comes this revolutionary concept. Two wheels of the same size. Go figure. The power of equality, baby. And as a result, cycling takes off. And it takes off in Europe and North America, and it takes off for women. But with the rise of women riding the bicycle comes the rise of bicycle face. Here are the symptoms of this terrifying condition. These are direct quotes, by the way. Flushed cheeks, hard clenched jaw, bulging eyes, an expression that is either anxious, irritable, or at best, stony. That's right. Long before there was resting bitch face, there was resting bike face. Now here's the thing. There's women who are riding bicycles. In fact, the majority of those who had taken up the hobby were men. But bicycle face? That was strictly a woman's disease. Why? Because bicycle face was invented to purely scare women off their wheels.
Yep.
Here's what was really going on. Back then, the bicycle became a symbol for a growing feminist movement. All of a sudden, women could go further and faster, and they didn't need to wait around for a gentleman to show up with his horseback and give them a ride. Suffragists could now meet with one another from town to town, and they would take their signs and they would affix them to the front of their handlebars. Because of the bicycle, women even started wanting different clothes. Victorian hoop skirts? Psh, so last season. Women wanted breezy bloomers, better for pedaling. As one magazine wrote in 1896, to men, the bicycle was merely just a new toy. But to women, it was the steed upon which they rode into the new world. Of course, it wasn't long before men started seeing bikes as more than just a new toy too. To them, bicycles and the behavior they were enabling with women were jarring, dangerous, threatening to the status quo. More than a century later, we can see bicycle face for what it is, or what it was. Not a medical mistake, but a deliberate tool, a strategy wielded by powerful men to put women back in their place.
Wow.
Wow.
That was really, really good.
Well, good thing I don't ride a bike. I don't want that.
Resting bike.
Bulging eyes. Jeez.
Oh, it reminds me of it was a couple years ago now. It went viral. It was a true tweet thread. An account which I think has since been banned. That was called Alpha Masculinity. Made a whole thing on how women shouldn't ride horses, but also bicycles, because he said, I did a TikTok on it, so I remember the quote. He said, quote, "The bike acts as a mega vibrator, and that women have multiple orgasms. And that's why women shouldn't ride bicycles, because they should only be getting pleasure from their husbands."
Well, that's even a journey too, because like there was a long time where there was like they didn't know how to pleasure a woman. They had no idea.
Well, and I've heard that about horses and bicycles too, because, excuse my language, but it can break the hymen, and then you can no longer prove your virginity, which is so important to women.
That's another one of the miracles that have been claimed, that women's hymens regrow.
Yep, I've heard that claim in a purity culture sermon myself in college.
Yeah, and how do you say prove it? Like, how do you prove?
Yeah,
like,
who's checking that?
Who's checking that? Nobody.
The same person checking genitalia for the bathroom to make sure people are going in the right bathroom. And so it's not everybody's screaming, oh, they're angry because Harrison Butker said godly principles and everybody hates godly principles. No, we hate women, bio males, queer people, anybody who's outcast in the Bible language or marginalized, being told you're less than, because it creates a dangerous echo chamber mindset space under which they live that puts them literally in danger. It's dangerous rhetoric. Yeah. And it also talks about this idea that they're going to try to impose this stuff through civil law as well, which is also incredibly dangerous and cringy.
Yeah, totally.
Well, TJ, what fun to talk to you.
You guys too. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. And everyone that was watching, thank you. I saw your sweet texts. Thank you to everybody for listening to Heaven Bent, and I hope it's meaningful to you.
Yes, everyone, if you haven't checked out the podcast, I highly recommend go listen to Heaven Bent. Follow the podcast on all the socials. And
I saw you're leaving your network and starting your own network. Is that right?
I'm not starting my own network, but I've been on a podcast network since I started Heaven Bent, since I launched it. And I'm just feeling ready to be an independent podcaster, which just means I'm losing the benefits that a podcast network gives me, like legal support, a travel budget, an editor, production assistance if I need it. But when it comes down to it, I do a lot of this, a lot of people do podcasts. They got a lot of different people that do all the jobs. I'm a control freak. I think I could do everything better than everyone else. So I'm just going to do it myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So my next 2-part series, which is with Tammy Woods, one of Mike Bickle's alleged victims, will be my first release as an independent podcaster. And I can't wait. I'm really proud.
Very cool.
That's so exciting.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Remember, we are off next week. And in 2 weeks, we'll be at the 5 p.m. West Coast, 8 p.m. East Coast time with Sarah McCammon, who wrote The Exvangelical. So that's 2 weeks from 2 weeks
on
from
Wednesday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, whatever that Wednesday is.
Kind of back towards our regular time.
Follow our socials.
Yes, absolutely. All right. We'll see you all soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.